twice as much US bonds and equities as the rest of the world combined. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent saying at Davos that Europe dumping treasuries is a false narrative. Well, we had the first salvo of European retaliation, wobbling treasuries overnight, as you can see here. Yields on 10 and 30-year treasuries resetting into the ranges. And ironically, that putting a lot more pressure on mortgage rates than President Trump's relief would help. As I say, these moves somewhat reversing today. Just take a look at the snapshot of markets at the moment. You can see futures are higher stateside, gold climbing still, but the 10-year Treasury yield here at 4.27%. What could change all this? The risk events on the docket today include UK CPI at 7 a.m. London time, the main event, Trump speaking at Davos, and later on, the Supreme Court hearing Lisa Cook's case as well. We're going to bring you that speech from President Trump in Davos on Bloomberg Television. That's scheduled to begin at 1:30 p.m. London time. But don't miss it. The opening trade's up next. Anna, Guy and Tom will take you all the way to the start of the European cash trade. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. Good morning from London.
Nobusan, would you say, when you look at your career, that the pivotal moment was actually that meeting with Robert De Niro? It took him 4 years to convince you to open a restaurant near him. You eventually did, and that started a partnership that has lasted through the decade.
You know, I met him 1988 after my first restaurant opened. He asked me to come to open the restaurant in New York. And beginning, I didn't know what he did.
You didn't know he was an actor?
No, I don't know. What he doing? Because I never watched the movies, I was traveling, the business. But of course, after, people, hey, Nobu, so you must know him. And then I understand.
How is he as a partner?
He's, for me, and a great partner. He understands to my concept. He supports me 100%. But he's a very smart people. Sometimes, so strange idea, but it's good idea. So, example, Nobu Hotels idea come from him. He said, hey, Nobu, so we have a lot of new restaurants coming in somebody's hotel. For him, doesn't make any sense. Then we start Nobu Hotel in Las Vegas 11 years ago. Now it's a big success. So next step is the residence.
Good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Welcome back to the opening trade. Watch Bloomberg Tech. This is the Asia Trade.
This is Wall Street Week. Welcome to Balance of Power.
This is Bloomberg Television.
Bringing you the world's business and financial news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Michael McKee at Mount Everest. And this is Bloomberg.
It is Wednesday the 21st. Good morning. On the agenda, Trump Day in Davos, Japanese bonds rebound, and UK inflation data is imminent. Anna.
Markets do look, Tom, a little bit calmer than they did this time yesterday. That is the good news. If you're looking for calmness, maybe that's not what you're looking for. But Eurostoxx 50 futures down by 0.2%. So we could see a little bit more weakness at the start of trade. US futures, though, point a little higher. Are we done with the dollar selling narrative or the US selling narrative? Well, the dollar at least is pretty flat, but President Trump speaks later. We'll see what he has to say. Are we done with selling Japanese yield Japanese debt. Yields are certainly falling. We're down by 14 basis points at the 30-year. The countdown to the opening trade starts right now.
We have a lot of meetings scheduled on Greenland. I'm leaving tonight, as you know, Davos. And we have a lot of meetings scheduled on Greenland. And I think things are going to work out pretty well, actually.
It is going to be a big day in Davos. It is a huge day for the dollar. The President of the United States is en route. Yes, there was a few travel troubles, but he is coming, and he is going to deliver a speech a little bit later on today. The dollar was down hard yesterday. It has bounced a little bit, but it is by no means filling the gap. It has effectively stayed down. We're trading, say, 117 euro dollar. What does this speech mean for financial markets? Are we going to see Trump upping the rhetoric? How much further is he prepared to go? And how will markets react? The dollar is in the crosshairs today.
Yeah, the dollar absolutely is. And what, like you say, what message will he come wanting to give? Will he be wanting to ratchet up tensions? Will he be wanting to ease tensions? Some of that soundbite you just played from President Trump said, you know, does that sound like, it kind of sounded like someone who wanted to find some common ground, but, you know, that's not been the story of the last few days, has it? So we'll see whether that is actually the case. But yesterday, the conversation very much, and no doubt will continue through 2026, around the Sell America narrative, to what extent it extends or not.
And that debate was on the ground for us in Davos. Of course, what does the speech do? Either to lean into the Sell America trade or to defang it? Because you had Sergio Motti coming out telling Bloomberg that essentially the idea of selling US Treasuries, there is no alternative, essentially, paraphrasing what Sergio Motti had to say. It would be a dangerous bet. But we also saw one of the largest holders of Treasuries in Denmark, a Danish bank, saying they're going to start to exit that trade. So the debate remains live, and the speech today will either lean against that or into that.
I'm not even sure you have to sell. You just have to not buy. And I think that probably is what a lot of people are thinking about as well. Don't necessarily have to aggressively sell out of your position. America needs funding, and if that funding does not continue, then that's going to be a problem for yields. And you're going to see a problem with the dollar. Does the dollar trade continue to be the pain point for America? It's not in stocks. To a certain extent, it's in the debt market, but the dollar is where the signs of weakness are. If Trump comes today and sounds bellicose, how does Europe react? How do European leaders react? Carney's talking about a new world order. Is Europe prepared to push back this time? I think this speech is absolutely critical to where the buck goes next.
Yes, and you're right to point out that Treasuries didn't maybe move quite so much on this. They were moving on Japan yesterday, and Japan was a really big topic of conversation. And there again, things do look a little bit calmer, but, you know, we'll see. The finance minister calling for calm. We have seen yields on the move as a result of that. We've seen buying of Japanese long end. We've seen those yields coming down. And we've seen the second largest bank actually in Japan. This is Sumitomo Mitsui, saying that they will double their holdings of JGBs. But just echoing what Mark Cudmore told us yesterday, they're waiting for some calmness. They're waiting for a floor to be put in this trade. Not sure we got it today. Maybe we have. But they're waiting for the floor to come in so that they can establish to what extent they want to repatriate. Because it is all about that repatriation trade as well.
Japanese yields have come down a little bit, but they've only come down a little bit. It feels like a big move this morning, but actually, if you take a look at the 2-day chart, the 3-day chart,
up 30, down 15.
Yeah, precisely. So we are still significantly more elevated, and that's true of a lot of bond markets as well. And here, you had the UK blow up. Now you're getting a Japanese blow up. People are asking whether the US is next. Are these just pre-shocks towards the big one, which is basically a crisis in the US bond market? It doesn't feel like we're there yet by any stretch of the imagination. But the fiscal story is absolutely front and centre, and the bond market is worried.
And the question in Japan is how you fund these tax cuts. And still there is no clear answer to that from the Japanese government. And until there is an answer on that, then the view is there's going to be still continued volatility in the Japanese bond markets. And to your point, there is still a question mark about how the US can fund this deficit with those tax cuts really coming into force in 2026.
Let's talk about the UK, because we have data coming out there around the UK, and this coming a day after we got the wage data, Tom.
Really focused on services. Broadly, the data that's coming out in the last few minutes is broadly in line with the survey. On services, though, edging a little bit lower, 4.5%. That's on a year-on-year basis for the December number. The survey had been for 4.6%. At a month-on-month level, the broad CPI headline number coming in bang in line with the survey, 0.4%. Year-on-year, a little bit higher, 3.4% versus a survey of 3.3%. But again, services seemingly heading in the right direction. There's all the anomalies, of course. This is the December print, so the holiday factors. There's an expectation from Bloomberg Economics ahead of this data that you're still on track to get to 2% in terms of headline inflation by April. See if they adjust that view. Looking at the pound, not a huge move right now, 134 on sterling. There was a little bit of downside, but that's adjusted.
Because the market was looking for this. They weren't looking for this slight uptick. It has come in, the year-on-year number has come in a little higher than the market anticipated. But to your point, Tom, maybe it's the fact that services are a little lighter that means that the pound is just sort of fluctuating around the going nowhere territory. Perhaps just relieved to be moving, or at least having some domestic news items to deal with, because yesterday was very much about what was going on in the US. And what was going on in Japan?
And what was going on in Japan? Yeah, I'm just trying to go through the details. Passenger transport by air looks like it's coming through at 0.3. That was the November number. Actually, that was the November number. They haven't filled in the number for this time. There's lots of anomalies. Airfares is going to be
there was
one
an
of them.
expectation. Bloomberg getting numbers. They saw tobacco and airfares.
Yeah.
Were two components. So
But
what the numbers are on that.
basically, this is a blip, and it's expected to unwind fairly quickly. Burberry's numbers are out as well. Comp sales up by 3. The expectation was for a 2.29 number. But again, how do you treat a luxury stock right now? Burberry's gone sideways for a very long time here. How exposed is it to trade wars and all the other factors, or is this still a can they get the fashion right story?
Absolutely. Josh Schulman is the relatively new CEO at that business. A lot of confidence in him from various brokers, UBS, Barclays, RBC, all pretty positive. Some of them suggesting that the market has been underpricing the turnaround. So we'll see whether that really does deliver. Let's tell you about some of the conversations, great conversations coming up on the programme today from here in London and in Davos. Let's start with Davos, of course. From the slopes in Switzerland, we'll be hearing from Jameson Greer, the US trade representative. That is a very timely conversation, as is the conversation with Steve Witkoff, US special envoy from the Middle East to Russia. He seems to be everywhere in every geography, so plenty to talk about with him, no doubt. Bill Winters, Standard Chartered's CEO, will be with us to talk about how the markets, how investors, how the banking sector is coping with the volatility that we are seeing in some asset classes.
So some of the key names to stay tuned for throughout our programming. 9 a.m. UK time. Also worth noting, we're going to be getting the IEA oil markets report. So another gauge, another bit of colour in terms of demand around oil. Of course, we have seen those weaker prices. Iran is a factor still. US earnings, of course, Johnson & Johnson, Halliburton and Charles Schwab, they come as well. Those earnings will break those across US programming. Warner Brothers shareholder deadline, that is, of course, interesting on the back of the Netflix results. And Netflix CEO saying they continue to focus on that takeover, of course, of Warner Brothers. And later, the Supreme Court, yes, they didn't rule on tariffs yesterday, but they will be hearing the case against or around Lisa Cook, of course, and whether or not the Trump administration has the legal chops to be able to force her out of her job. So that is an important one in terms of any decision it comes.
Yeah, she is arguing because of the nature of what is alleged against her, the scale of it, or the lack of scale, as she would see it, and because of the timing of it, that this is not cause. So this is that's her argument. The reason this matters is it's all about reshaping the Fed and the extent to which Trump is able to do that.
Scott Bessent is once again speaking in Davos. Let's take a listen to what the Treasury Secretary has to say.
In terms of our bilateral relationships, if Switzerland more and more would side with EU, for example, or would depart from our traditional neutrality?
Well, let's talk about what Switzerland emulating the failed EU economic policies would do. Switzerland, a country of 9 million people, amazingly, the box is so far above its weight class. It is an industrial powerhouse. It is home to, as I said yesterday, a thriving middle class. And I would worry if you started emulating the EU policies of administration, bureaucracy, and economic sclerosis. And it would be very disappointing if Switzerland decided to get on the EU bandwagon, talk first, and not think about the consequences later.
Move to the next question, please. Front row, yellow tie. Please.
Edward Lawrence, Fox. Thanks, Secretary. So the president says he's going to put a 10% tariff on green starting February 1st. goes up to 25%. How concerned are you going to start a trade war with Europe? And is it worth risking the U.S. economy for Greenland?
Well, I'm not going to get ahead of the president. The president obviously believes that national.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for coming back to the channel. Today, we're taking a look at the Happy Model Larva. This is another sort of microlight, hyperlight, toothpick, twig, power light, whatever you want to call these now. It seems to me that micros have just changed. In the last 6 months, micros have just changed. Everything we're flying is smaller, it's lighter, it's higher performing, and we have a lot more options to build. We don't just have one flight controller and one motor and one prop. We've got all sorts of options. Let's take a look at this one and its combination and how it flies. Features the Crazy Bee F4 Pro version 3 flight controller that has a 10 amp ESC, the RunCam Nano 2 FPV camera, the Happy Model Diamond VTX, which also has onboard SD recording. VTX is power switchable up to 200 milliwatt. Happy Model 1103 7000 kV motors, running Emax Avon 2.5-inch props. Flight controller has a built-in receiver. Specs say it can be in D8 or D16 mode. I use D8. Motor post to motor post, I am getting 100 millimeters. Bottom plate looks like it's 3 millimeters thick. All these different braces appear to be about 2 millimeters thick. Looks like we have more material around the motor mounting screws. This busted up canopy is far from final. And every time I flew it, I forgot to record to the SD card. Mine weighs 49.5 grams. I flew it on this GNB 3S 520 milliamp battery, which weighs 42.5 grams. For your reference, this 3S 450 milliamp tattoo battery weighs a little over 40.5 grams. And this old GNB 3S 450 weighs 48.5 grams. So the 520 GNB weighs less than the old 450 GNB, and the Tattoo 450 is only 3 grams less than the 520 GNB. So the flight I'm going to show you is not my best flight by any stretch, but I kept breaking the canopy all the time, and I kind of got tired of fixing it, and I lost a piece the last breakage, and I thought, okay, this is where I'm going to stop. I'm going to pick a flight from what I have, and we're just going to run with it. So you're going to get to see me get quite sloppy. You're going to get to see me miss a couple lines. It'll be just a hoot, won't it? As we hit this punch out, listen to the props. You can almost hear the props get to a point at the top end that they're just not reaching what seems to be the maximum. And I think that's the reason why I like to include sound, is it tells me a little bit about my own flight, and hopefully it tells you something about your flight as well. So this little quad is, it's got a lot of the features that I think most people are looking for. So you've got a VTX that goes up to 200 milliwatts. You can record the SD card, which I apologize, I'm not showing you, but I will be. A little bit later, I am going to give you some footage, and you're going to say, well, how'd you do that? Because you broke the canopy. Well, I'm going to fix the canopy with a different canopy, and then I'm going to go out and fly it again, and I'm going to give you a little sample of that flight footage. A little bit of a warning about that. I believe that records in 1280 by 720 resolution, so it's a little bit widescreen, so it's not the typical 4:3 that we're used to. And also, the SD card does not have any of the OSD information, which I think for many of you is kind of flight critical information. So you can see the throttle position, you can see the battery sag, you can see the current sensor and its activity, and as well as the flight time. Rather than having to ask about the flight time or me having to put some text over the top of the video about the flight time itself. Hopefully you understood from me weighing all the batteries the reason why I went with the battery I want, because at 2 grams and to get 70 more milliamps of power to be able to use in the flights that I want to, and in a flight like I like to fly, that's where I found myself. You can use a lighter battery and you'll find yourself gain a little bit of agility. You might find that your flight time goes down by as much as 40 seconds, depending upon how you fly. Again, we kind of covered the how you fly thing in the Cream Puff video. If you have any questions about that, I'll be glad to answer them. Of course, this is only up on pre-sale or pre-order, and I believe the price is $97. I don't think you can get it or use any coupons on that, so that is the flat price. And here we go. Now I'm bailing out of these runs. I'm going to go and try it again. Now, you might say, why don't you just correct in midair and then hit the hole? Well, I would do that, but I like to kind of hit it clean, and so usually what I have to do is I have to practice a little bit with the quad, so I kind of get that launch angle just right. And on a particular day, if the wind direction changes, that can also throw me offline a little bit. So Happy Model is going to change a few things. So the canopy, like I said, is far from final. They're getting I've been told, a press molded canopy. They're also going to use steel screws in the flight stack, which is a good thing. I also encourage them to hard mount it. Now, some of you may disagree with me, but I have found that if you don't hard mount, you oftentimes end up with jello on aggressive flight with the TPU canopy. But if it's hard plastic, it might be okay. There we have have our end result OSD. I went a little bit too far on the battery. So like I said, I apologize that I didn't have that SD card. I got about a dozen flights in with this, and my canopy has just had it. Another point about using nylon screws, it's actually putting stress on this canopy. As you can see, it's kind of bowed out on this side over here. Hopefully you can see that it's fairly clear. So the canopy is actually holding these nylon screws together. So you've got to have a pretty rigid and pretty good canopy in order to make this all kind of work. And of course, if you have a hard enough crash, you could even break your nylon standoff. So that's a bad thing, because if you get your VTX components in contact with your flight controller, you could end up with a short and some sadness. They do route the wires underneath. That gives you a slight opportunity that if that were to happen, that the VTX would come to rest on the wires and not touch other components that are powered on in your crash. I do applaud them for the design. It looks like it's make use a little bit of that cube design, or at least it does to me a little bit. And a point made on the Cream Puff video, this sucker, if you get it stuck in a tree, might be a pretty serious challenge getting it out, because you get a branch up through there, and it's really only going to want to come out one way, which is back off that branch up. So these, tri-blades act like a grappling hook in a tree anyways. Now you can kind of multiply that factor by a couple of degrees with all these particular holes. So if you're afraid of climbing trees, or you're afraid of getting stuck in trees, that's something to note. I suppose you could cover this with tape, but that's really going to change its flight characteristics quite a bit. I like the fact that they've used the Avan props. I think the Avan props probably didn't get their due until here in the last couple months. We're seeing more models come out with that. I'm a little surprised at the 7,000 kV, because I was using the 8,000 kV in my tests and my Cream Puff, and I thought the 8,000 kV motors were pretty good. You do get slightly, it's very small bit of additional motor response in the low end, and I don't feel like I miss a lot on the top end. I'm just surprised because I wasn't aware of these 7,000 kV motors were even available. We've got the VTX. I was flying it on 200 milliwatts, so you have to judge whether that VTX with my rapid fire module are doing an adequate job of showing you the flight footage rather than break up. The battery strap that it comes with is, of course, a budget battery strap on a budget quad. I think if we were to pay more, maybe we should expect a different one. Hopefully you have the battery strap that you prefer to use in your bin. I always cut off the big end because I really don't like having that in there. And also, before the video, I took off my battery mounting pad. That's the URUAV sticky stuff. It's kind of a knockoff of the UmaGrip. It's not nearly as good as UmaGrip, but it does work quite well. Just not as well as the UmaGrip. You note that they took off the capacitor. It's because they've increased their ESC overhead. You could see the ESC stats on screen, or the amp draw on screen throughout the flight, and on the in-screen results if you wanted to go back and look at that. Here's a little bit of flight footage from the SD card so that you can get a view of that. But I think I've kind of gotten used to having the flight stats, the OSD stuff on screen. I think I have a bias against not having that. I've gotten so used to flying micros with that OSD stuff over the last couple of years that I kind of miss it. But of course, when we're flying it, we get to see that stuff. And if you wanted to show somebody a flight that didn't have that stuff in it, which would be more appealing to the masses, so people who weren't necessarily familiar with the quad or quad racing or freestyling space, they might find that much more interesting. So that's a bonus feature, but you have to judge whether that's a big bonus or a little bonus or no bonus. This VTX does weigh 1 gram more than the VTX that does not have the SD card, so that's something to consider. If you wanted to drop an extra gram when you get yours, you could swap out that VTX. I think it costs about $16 or $17. I might be wrong on that price. I'll put on screen how much the standard VTX costs. The stock tune that it came with, I didn't care for, so I did my own tune, which you see on screen. Also, the filters I did not tinker with. That's how it came to me as well. The power settings I did not agree with. Oftentimes, I find quads, when they come through Banggood or something of that nature, that the power settings have been adjusted down. If they've done anything to Betaflight, they've adjusted the power settings down, and that does give you a longer flight, but it also puts your battery in peril when you get it down below 3.5 volts per cell. So I would pump that buck up to a minimum warning of 3.4 volts per cell. The Betaflight version that it's running is the 404. So you do have version 4 on there, and I was a little bit surprised at the tune I was able to get out of this. So that may be a combination that works pretty well. I don't know about 405. I haven't tried that yet. So this little Ripper is pretty good fun. I'm a little bit concerned about the canopy. That's always an area I'm kind of hesitant to endorse it because we don't know what the final product is going to be like. It's a lot of fun. It depends on if the canopy adds a bunch of weight, that's going to decrease its performance, and for me, it would decrease the fun. But I don't think it will add too much weight because I've been weighing some other canopies that I have, and some are molded plastic, and I can't see it adding more than a gram or two at most. So I have a good feeling that this will be a pretty good performer. I also think that the way they've built the frame and the thickness of the frame, it should hold up pretty well. But as with all things, it kind of depends on what you're crashing into and how fast you're doing it. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the section down below. I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching. Got a major foofy going on there.
In this video, we're checking out the Larva X from Happy Model. This is another toothpick style drone here, but it's sort of like an upgraded version of the Sailfly X. And this comes with better motors. It's got the 1103 7000 kV motors here, 3mm bottom plate. It's got an upgraded all-in-one flight control. This is the new Crazy Bee F4 version 3.0. It has a 10 amp 4-in-1 AC now. And I think they fixed the capacitor issue. There's no capacitor on the plug anymore. I think they've added this to the board itself. This one here is the onboard receiver version. I'll talk about that here in a little bit. Comes with the Diamond VTX that I already did a review video on. It's a video transmitter, 200 milliwatts, plus an onboard DVR, so you can put a micro SD card here, record your flights. They're straight from the camera. And you get no video breakup, obviously, in those recordings. You'll see that a little bit later. This come with the Emax Vivon Micro 2.5-inch props here instead of the bi-bladed props. And they got the Runcam Nano 2 for the camera. So overall, pretty nice package here. The frame is fairly stiff and 3mm thick and fairly solid. I think the only thing I would change about this build would be these standoffs here, or these screws that hold everything together, these little white ones here. They're nylon. I think those should be steel. It does cause the top to wiggle a little bit. There wasn't really any jello from the canopy, but yeah, something that I think they could change. I'm going to suggest that to them. Now, the canopy here is not a final version for sure. This is a 3D printed canopy. It's not TPU. It's like some sort of a PLA or ABS or something like that. It's pretty hard. But the final version of the canopy is going to be molded plastic. So I'm not sure what the color is going to be. If you guys have any suggestions on what colors that they should use, let me know in the comments below. I'll pass that on, as well as any other suggestions you think about this model. This is still technically a prototype. It's not a final version. This one here does come with the FrSky SPI receiver. You can see the little antenna right there. It's kind of hard to see. So not the best range, of course, with the onboard SPI receiver. So if you're looking for better range, there's the plug-and-play version that does not have an onboard receiver. You can add your own receiver. There's an RXSR version, and there's also a Crossfire Nano version. Actually, that's the one that I'm actually going to request and see if I can't see how that performs, because I'm kind of curious where they're going to stick that Crossfire Nano receiver as well as the antenna. That should be an interesting product, I think. So that'll be, of course, down the road. Not right now, not obviously in this video. But yeah, I mean, overall, I like the product. Pretty solid in terms of the design and the build. Obviously, it's a toothpick style. This design here, you know, there's a lot of these toothpick style quads out now. So I think two particularly, you know, innovative or different compared to a lot of the other ones that we've seen already on my channel. We'll go ahead and show you what the weight is. Okay, so here's the weight without any battery, just under 50 grams. And I'm using a 3S 300 milliamp hour high volt. This is one that's from URUAV. There's 108 Sheen, Happy Model, GMB, and Crazy Pony. I think they're all made at the same place, but this is the battery that I used for my flights. And so with the battery together, it's coming in at 75.75 grams. I would say that if you want a little bit more flight time, you know, it's probably getting about 3 minutes on this battery. If you want more flight time, go to like a 453S. I did have to adjust the tune that they provided. I think that they tuned this for a 354S, and I didn't really like that tune too much. Now, I'm told that that's probably going to change, so I'm not going to, you know, knock them too much for the tune because it's not the final version. But I did adjust the PIDs a little bit for this battery, and I got a pretty good flat. I mean, I was pretty happy with just making some really minor adjustments and using this battery. I thought it flew pretty good. So when I get the final version, if onboard PIDs aren't any good, I will probably do a PID video later on, but not for this particular video because this is not a final version right now. Anyway, so overall, I thought this flew pretty good. I think that there's a few minor things that I would suggest that they tweak, but I think this is almost pretty much a finished product here. Anyway, I definitely would recommend you check it out if you're interested in a bind and fly ready to go toothpick style quad with onboard video recording. Anyway, here's some flight footage for you, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video.
Fuck. Fingers. Ah. clear solution.
feel reasonable, but whatever their motors are exceptionally light and perform decent, not great, but decently. These motors are no different. This is their 1103 version of their 1102 motor, and it's just barely capable of swinging this. Hey guys, what is the best digital FPV system for you? Is it DJI or is it Walksnail? I am a DJI flyer, but I've been hearing more and more about Walksnail and how much
makes the quadcopter fly. And binding is the process of telling this receiver that it should be listening to this transmitter. When you're out at the field and you've got a bunch of friends flying, they're all transmitting at the same time. How do you make sure that you're not controlling your friend's quad? Binding is the process of how you do that. The transmitter that we're going to be using in this example is the FrSky X9 Lite. And we're using that because I actually think it's a pretty good beginner transmitter. But if you just bought your FrSky X9 Lite, you actually can't bind it to the Happy Model Larva X. The FrSky X9 Lite comes from the factory programmed to support something called the Access Protocol. This guy doesn't use the Access Protocol. It uses a different protocol called D16. Now, I've actually done a firmware update on my X9 Lite that lets it support D16 protocol. And if you have an X9 Lite, you will need to do that in order to bind this guy to your X9 Lite. I have a video about how to do that. It's linked down in the video description. And if you're using this exact gear, then you're going to need to go through that step. However, if you're using any other FrSky radio like the QX7, the X9D, any of those radios that support the D16 protocol out of the box, then you don't need to do anything special. You'll just be ready to go. If you are using one of those other radios, don't freak out. The screens that you'll see are going to look an awful lot like the screens that are on this radio. A few of the screens might be a little different, but you can probably get through it. So, let's power this radio on.
Welcome to OpenTX. Throttle warning.
Lovely. And what I'm going to do for this video is, I'm going to create a brand new model in the X9 Lite transmitter. Now, what's a model? If you have a bunch of different quadcopters, airplanes, cars, boats, a bunch of different radio-controlled craft, you might have a different model in your transmitter for each of them, because on some of them the switches may do one thing, on some of them the switches may do something else, and the model is the collection of settings that is appropriate for each vehicle that you're flying. Now, in reality, I use the same model for all of my quadcopters because all of my quadcopters are set up exactly the same. A lot of people in the beginning feel more comfortable creating a new model for every vehicle that they fly, every aircraft, etc. You can decide how you want to do that. In this case, I'm going to take you through the process of setting up a new model because, well, you may not have set one up before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the menu key, and I'm going to scroll down to slot number 2, and I'm going to long press and create model. This will create a brand new blank model. I'm then going to be asked to select the model type, and I'm just going to hit exit and back out of that. We'll set this up manually. Now that this model is loaded, I'm going to press the page key one time, and there's a bunch of options here. I'm not going to worry about most of them, but I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom of the screen where I see the option internal RF mode. And I'm going to click one time, and I'm going to change that mode from access to ACCST D16. That is the mode that this radio needs to be in order to be able to bind to the receiver on the Happy Model Larva X. Then I'm going to scroll down to where it says bind, and I'm going to click one time, and I'm going to choose channel 1 through 8 telemetry on. Don't worry about that option's not too important, just select that option. And then the radio will begin beeping like you hear now. That indicates to us that it is in binding mode. Here on the computer, I'm going to start up Betaflight Configurator, and if this is really your first time, you may never have downloaded Betaflight Configurator. I've got a separate video that walks you through the process of downloading Betaflight Configurator, installing it, and installing the STM32 USB virtual COM port drivers. These are some things you got to go through the very first time you set up a quadcopter. If you've never done that before, link in the video description to my Betaflight setup video. We're going to assume that you've done that or that you've gone and watched that video and come back, and now you have the configurator ready to go. I'm going to plug this quadcopter in to the USB port on my computer, and when I do that, you should see that COM3 or some other COM port number appears right here, and that will indicate that it's plugged in and ready to go. If I unplug USB, you see it disappears and becomes COM1, or maybe it says manual selection. That indicates to you that your drivers are working, your USB port is working, etc. I'm going to go ahead and hit connect. I'm going to go take that out of bind mode so that it's not beeping at me the whole time. Be right back. The next thing I did is I went to the configuration screen here, and I want to check the type of receiver protocol that the Larva X is sent with, and I can see that it is set to FrSky_D, and that is unfortunate because the FreeSky D protocol is actually not supported by my radio. I'm going to change that from FreeSky D to FreeSky X. If you're using most modern FreeSky radios, you probably want to be using FreeSky X, not FreeSky D. I know the reason why they ship it with FreeSky D, but we're going to change that, and we're going to hit save and reboot. If you have a transmitter that supports D8 mode binding, then you don't have to make that change that I just showed you. But my transmitter doesn't support D8, and yours may not either. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the CLI tab, the command line tab, and I want you to see on the quadcopter that there is a blinking red light at the front of the quadcopter. I'm going to type the command bind _RX_SPI. And when I do that and hit enter, you'll see that light go solid red, and that will indicate that the quadcopter is in binding mode. Now I'll go ahead and reactivate binding here on the transmitter. And you see that the light begins blinking again on the quadcopter. That indicates that binding has happened. There's one more thing that I need to do here in the binding screen, and that is where it says failsafe, I need to change that from not set to no pulses. The reason that's important is that the failsafe setting controls what happens if your quadcopter loses connection with the transmitter for any reason, like you just pull the battery out, or if you fly too far away and the radio link gets weak. No pulses is what you want the failsafe set to, and that will cause the flight controller to know that that's happened, and the quad will basically shut down and fall out of the sky. Better than it flying into somebody's face. The next thing I need to do is I need to check the channel order of the transmitter to see that it matches the channel order that the quadcopter is expecting. And looking here in the documentation of the device, you can see it says the default channel map for the Larva X is TAER. TAER refers to the throttle, T. Aileron, we don't actually have ailerons, this isn't an airplane, but on an airplane, the ailerons control the roll axis, the elevator controls the pitch axis, and the rudder controls the yaw axis, and it would make a lot more sense if we just said pitch, roll, and yaw, but we don't. We say AER. So TAER is the channel order that we need, and we're going to check that by hitting menu one time, and then page, and we'll keep hitting page until we get to the mixer screen, and we want to see that the channel order is TAER, and sure enough it is, so we don't need to make any changes there. The next thing we need to do is we need to set up an arming switch for the quadcopter. Arming means that you're telling the quadcopter that you are ready to fly it and you want it to begin spinning the motors, and disarming means that you want the quadcopter to be sort of safe and not spin the motors. So it's like the ignition on your car. I think that the best arming switch on most transmitters is the upper left shoulder. Just a big 2-position switch is usually there, and that's what we can use to arm. Some people prefer to use a switch on the front of the radio because they find it a little easier to reach with their fingers. The bottom line is you need to find a switch that you will remember and that you find sort of ergonomically pleasant. You do not want it to be a momentary switch. Do you see how that switch doesn't hold its position? You don't want it to be a momentary switch. You want it to be a switch that holds its position, and personally, I like a 2-position switch, arm, disarm, right? Okay, so I'm going to use this switch right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to channel 5, and I'm going to click one time, and that will create a new mix on channel 5. A mix is a way of mapping inputs, like a switch, to outputs to the receiver and to the flight controller. I'm going to go down one line to where the source is for the mix, and I'm going to click one time, and the source will begin blinking. Then I'm going to flip the switch one time that I'm going to use to control this function, and you'll see it fills in the name of the switch there, SD. I'm going to hit exit one time, and it'll stop blinking. But that's actually all that we need to do. You can see here that as I flip the switch, we can see this channel position here in the channel monitor moving from low to high and back again. Now, the documentation for the Larva X shows that it comes pre-configured with an arming range set up so that the quadcopter will arm, and this yellow segment of the channel is where the quadcopter will arm. So the low position is down here, the high position is up here, and we can see that the quadcopter is set up to arm when the channel is in the high position. You can obviously set this up any way that you prefer, but this is the default way that it comes set up to make your life a little easier. If we go back and look at our switch positions here, we can see that when the switch is pushed away from you, the channel is in the low position, and when the switch is pulled toward you, the channel is in the high position. So what that's going to mean is you push away to disarm and pull towards to arm. And that's actually, doesn't really matter, but that's actually not how I like it. I think it's easier to disarm by just pulling towards yourself as opposed to arming by pushing away. So here's how we would reverse that if we wanted to. One way we could reverse it is just to go into Betaflight and change the way the arming mode is defined. The other way we can reverse that is to press page and then menu to get to the mixer screen. We'll go down to that channel 5 and we will long press and edit. And then we will change the weight from 100 to -100. And what that'll do is that'll just reverse the definition of the channel. It'll reverse the output of the channel. And then it'll basically flip the switch position. There we go, weight of -100. And now if I exit out, you can see that when the switch is toward me, the channel is in the low position, and when it's away, it's in the high position. So now we have pushed away to arm and pulled towards to disarm. You can set that up however you like, just remember how it's set up. That is actually pretty much all we need to do. We probably could fly this guy right now, but let's go back to the computer because there's a few more checks that I want to do just to make sure that everything is working the way that it should be working. So let's walk through just a couple more things I think you need to do before you take this guy out and try to fly it. And the first thing I want to do is I want to go to the receiver tab in Betaflight, and I just want to check that the channels are all the way that they need to be. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to move the sticks up, down, left, right. And what you want to see is that I'm moving the throttle up and down now, and the throttle channel is moving. The yaw is left and right on the left stick, and the yaw channel is moving. Pitch is up and down on the right stick, and the pitch channel is moving, and roll is left and right on the right stick, and the roll channel is moving. This is a Mode 2 transmitter. That's the way that my channels are mapped. You're probably using a Mode 2 transmitter, but in case you're not, the exact location of your pitch, roll, throttle, and yaw may not be the same, but you're going to want to just check that those are all correct, and the default settings are probably correct for most people. The other thing I want to check is the endpoints of my channels. Now, in this case, you can see that when my throttle's all the way down, my channel is at 988, and when it's all the way up, it's at 2012. Now, you absolutely can fly with it like this, but I'm going to show you a step that you can go through to tweak this just a bit to be absolutely perfect. Depending on the transmitter that you're using, your values may be way different. And if your values are way different, here's how to fix it. What you need to do is take each of the 4 channels and move the sticks left and right, up and down, and make a note of the values you see at the endpoints, at the extreme endpoints for each channel. Now, in my case, all of my channels are 988 and 2012. 988 and 2012. 988, 2012. So, for me, it's going to be simple because the numbers are the same. For you, you may need to make a note of roll, elevator, roll, yaw, and throttle. That's the endpoint values. And what you can do is you can go to the command line and type RX range 0, 988, 2012. Now, you're going to put in whatever numbers you had for the very first channel on your list. In my case, it's 988 and 2012 for all of them. Then I'm going to type RX range 1, 988, 2012. You're going to put in the numbers you had for the endpoints on your second channel. RX range 2, 988, 2012. RX range 3, 988, 2012. You're going to do that for all 4 of your channels, and then you're going to type save. And then back in the receiver tab, what you should see is that all of your channels now go from 1000 to 2000, exactly as they should be. Since you've now got your channel endpoints exactly perfect, 1000 to 2000, the next thing I'm going to ask you to do is change your stick low threshold from 1050 to 1005. The reason you do this is that if it's set to 1050, there will be a little bit of dead space at the bottom of your throttle where when you begin to raise the throttle, nothing happens. And that's to protect against people who didn't have me to show them along and who didn't know how to set up their endpoints correctly. But since we set up the endpoints correctly, you're good to go. So let's set the stick low threshold to 1005 and the stick high threshold to 1995. Next, let's go to the Modes tab, and they've got it set up for a Horizon mode and Air mode. I'm going to suggest that you do the following. Delete those modes, 1 and 2. And we're going to undo hide unused modes here. If you want to fly in auto level mode, you can add angle mode. And you do that by hitting add range. And then you're going to set up another switch for channel 6. Just like I showed you how to set up channel 5 for the arming mode, you could set up an angle mode or auto level mode, same thing, on channel 6. And you would do that by choosing a switch, choosing a place where you want the switch to be, high, middle, or low position, and then creating a channel mapping in the mixer screen to cause that switch to output on that channel. We might do that with channel 6, which would be aux 2. I'm not going to walk you through that step. I showed you how to do the arming one. You could do the same thing with a different switch for channel 2. I think you can probably figure it out. I'm not going to do that because I'm going to be flying in acro mode, like an acro rock star. The other thing I want you to do is go to the configuration tab, and I think you should turn on a feature called air mode. I think you should turn that on and leave it on all the time. And air mode will increase the authority of the quad when the throttle is lowered. If you don't have air mode on, then when you lower the throttle all the way down, if you're flying, actually the motors will stop and the quad will fall out of the sky. Is that true? Yeah, it will. So I don't think you want that. I don't want that. And I'm going to encourage you to turn air mode on and hit save and reboot. At this point, I think we should be good to go. Let's just double check by flipping the arm switch. Look at this little yellow indicator. Arm switch goes high. Arm switch goes here into this yellow segment. Low. Undisarm. Arm. I think we're good to go. Let's give it a try. Now, I'm going to be a bad example here and do something you should never, ever do. I'm going to test the quad with it in my hand. And the reason you shouldn't do this should be fairly freaking obvious. These motors are way more powerful than you think. And if this gets out of control, it can cut you really. Yes, even these little 2-inch props can cut the crap out of you. But I would really never do this with a 5-inch because they can really go crazy. But with this little 2-inch, I don't want to have to take, I would normally do this test outside, and you should do this test outside, but I don't want to have to take my camera all the way outside. I gotta, so I'm going to do this. I'm setting a bad example. Don't do this. If the quadcopter flips out and eats my face, I'm going to definitely post the video. Okay, here we go. It's a 3S battery. And what I want to do is I want to just flip the arming switch. I'm holding it so tight right now and just see that it arms. It didn't arm. Why isn't it arming? Oh, she's not happy. Why aren't you happy, little guy? Okay. Put it down on the table. Oh, maybe because it's not level? Let's hold it down on the... I know what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hold it on the table. It'll be out of camera view, but you'll hear it. I'm just going to hold it down on the table. Is it going to arm? Yay, it armed. It just didn't like that I was holding my hand. Okay, so it armed and disarmed? That's fantastic. Never do your first hover test in your house. That's how you get holes in the ceiling. I'm a professional. If I get a hole in my ceiling, I'll feel dumb. Let me move this further away. Yay! Okay. At this point, the next thing I think you should do is you should take the quad out and do a test hover somewhere safe. I've got a video where I walk you through how I do the initial test hover on a quadcopter and make sure it's ready to go. And this is just a line of sight hover. I don't put the goggles on. I don't just go fly it. I just basically lift it off, hover it 5 feet in the air, fly it a tiny bit, and then land it. And then I put my goggles on and I'm ready to go. In the video description, there's a link to exactly how I do that test hover. There's a couple little tweaks. The thing is, if the quadcopter is set up wrong, it can flip out and fly in a random direction. So there's a thing I do to make sure that I catch that before it gets too bad, and I'll link you to that video down in the video description. Now, let's say you've done your test hover and you're ready to start flying line of sight. Before you can fly the quad, you got to get your goggles on the correct channel, and my Larva X came from the factory on channel Raceband 2. The exact way that you put your goggles or your screen on Raceband 2 is going to vary, but you're going to want to get on Raceband 2. You can use the auto search function, and it may get you close, but you should know that the auto search function of your goggles doesn't always find exactly the right channel. So if you rely on auto search, you may get an image in your goggles, but then as soon as you fly away, you get really bad range because you're actually not on the exact right channel, you're on a nearby channel. So we're going to want to get on any channel where we can get an image, and then we're going to want to check that the video transmitter is set up right. And here's how we do that. Now I've got my Larva X here, and I do have a battery plugged in. This is a little dangerous because if I accidentally flip this switch, the props are going to start spinning. And you think I'm being dramatic, but these are habits that you need to get into because someday you'll be flying a bigger quad, and even if this little quad goes crazy, it's still not fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the throttle. And when the throttle is raised, for safety reasons, Betaflight will not arm the quad. So that's kind of like a little backup safety check. Whenever you're disarmed, just raise the throttle and then the quad won't arm. The other thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to set it upside down. In fact, let's just set it upside down here on the floor, you know, because who cares? You're looking at my carpet. Who cares? With it upside down, then if I do accidentally arm it, nothing bad will happen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the throttle, I'm going to put, I just told you to raise the throttle. Well, anyway, I'm going to take the throttle, I'm going to put it in the mid position, and I'm going to throttle, mid-throttle, yaw left, pitch forward, and that will bring, come back. There we go. That will bring up the Betaflight OSD. Then I'm going to use this stick to move around the menu, and I'm going to go down to Features and to the right, and that will bring me to a sub-menu, and I'm going to go to VTX SA, and I'm going to go to the right, and you're going to want to make really good friends with the VTX SA menu. SA stands for Smart Audio. It actually has nothing to do with audio. It lets you remote control your video transmitter. It lets you change your video transmitter channel, band, and output power. And this is something that's really important to do. If you fly by yourself, you're probably just going to put yourself on some channel and never change it and never think about it ever again. But if you ever fly with friends, you can't all be on the same channel at the same time. So you'll be like, hey, I'm on Raceband 2, and somebody else will be like, well, I'm already on Raceband 2. And you'll be like, okay, I'll just move on over to some other channel. This menu is how you can do it. The video transmitter on this quad does have some push buttons that you can also use to change the settings, but that's a pain in the butt. The only reason you would really use the push buttons would be if somehow you couldn't find the video transmitter in the image in your goggles. Obviously, you need to be on the same channel in order to see the OSD. So you might use the push buttons, but if you can use the menu and the on-screen display, it's way, way better. And the first thing I notice is that this guy appears to be on E-band channel 1, not race 2, so we're not actually on the correct channel, and gosh darn it, it's overheating and shutting down, and that sucks. So I'm going to go ahead and change this from E2, I'm going to change it to Raceband 2, that's the channel that I thought I was on. Then I'm going to take the output power, and actually comes set at output power of 500, which is max output power, and that's also what we want. That's good. I'm going to go down, and I'm going to go right on set, and it will set that, and now we'll be on channel Raceband 2 at 500 milliwatts. Now that's good. That's where I want to be. I don't care about what channel I'm on. I think you should set it to Raceband, because Raceband is a great frequency band that's, suffice it to say, a lot of places you'll go when you fly with other people, they'll be on Raceband, and it'll make you fit in. But having 500 milliwatts output power is good because that's going to give you more range. So I wanted to make sure that was set. At this point, you're ready to go fly this guy. It is completely set up. We've gone through all the steps, and good luck. If this is your first quad, you're going to crash a lot. I really recommend you spend a few hours in the simulator getting those first crashes out of the way. But we all know you're not going to do that, so have fun. I'm going to go fly this guy. I got to do a review of it. But before I do that, let me say goodbye to you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned a lot in this video. If this is your first quad, if you're new to the channel, welcome. I make a bunch of educational content to help you enjoy this hobby more, answer your questions. If you have questions that I didn't answer in this video, put them in the comments section, or if it's been a few weeks, sometimes YouTube doesn't show me old comments on old videos. You can always reach out to me on Facebook Messenger is the best way to do it, or you can just email me. Yep, I do my best to answer as many of them as you can. So if you have any questions, leave a comment, send me a message. I'll do my best to help you out. Thank you so much for watching, and happy flying. I'm Joshua Bardwell. You're going to learn something today. Hi there, new Ishin trash can owner. And yes, the trash can is the name of a quadcopter, not an actual trash can. But why'd they name it that? The Ishin trash can is going to be a lot of people's first quadcopter. And if that's you, then that's what I'm here to help you with. I'm here to help you set it up because you may not have known this, but they don't come from the manufacturer just ready to fly. There's a little bit of work you got to do to get them working. But that's what I'm for. I help people get their quadcopters in the air. And if this is your first time here, I'd like to get to know you. And let's start by going through the setup of the Ishin trash can. Now, setting up this quadcopter is going to involve a piece of software called Betaflight. And in order to use Betaflight, you're going to have to download and install it, and you're going to have to download and install some drivers on your computer. And I already made a video going through all of those steps. It's called Betaflight 3.4 and 3.5 for total beginners.
基隆到底适不适合盖捷运呢？我相信，即使现在基隆捷运第一阶段已经动起来了，还是会有人想在心中问这句话：这几年让人看得心碎的捷运线规划，我个人认为是基隆捷运真的太复杂了。这不单只是讨论基隆、台北两地的地理位置关系，还需要考量这段路线的台铁存废、民生市喜线的串接。一开始甚至提出基隆轻轨的想法，北宜直铁的规划也要纳进来评估。大家好，我是林志兴。今天就带你来看基隆捷运为什么不能从台铁改建，预算飙到1200多亿是怎么回事？沿途又有哪些重要工程？
我看了一下基隆捷运的路线图，基本上跟台铁路线高度重叠。为什么不能把台铁直接改建成捷运呢？当初淡水线也是从台铁改建而来的。
其实任何的交通重大建设，不止捷运，核心都是要改善联外交通。基隆在台北的最北端，是一个被山跟海夹击的城市。以台铁来说，基隆车站距离南港车站大概19-20公里，集结林口 A9到台北车站也差不多21公里。以这样的距离来看，照理来说，基隆应该是要首都圈紧密的卫星城市。没有真正那么紧密的原因，相信大家都知道，就是交通。如果你自己或是身边有人每天要从基隆往台北通勤上班，我相信一定有过这样的经验：只要雨一大，就有很高的几率会迟到。基隆终年多雨，雨天视线不好，容易发生事故，又造成严重的回堵。如果搭乘再早一班的客运，又会太早到；搭乘正常时间的车次，又会有迟到的风险。选择搭台铁可能好一点，但也不一定稳，因为大雨容易导致偏坡土石滑落与设备故障，导致台铁班次误点。外加台铁是沿基隆河谷走，也不是遍布基隆全区。当然可以开车通勤，但跟客运一样，会有塞在国道上的风险，或是其他在台北停车的成本要考量。但其实无论天气如何，国道和台铁这两条通行路线，对于基隆往台北来说已经很饱和了，所以需要第三条路来打破僵局，才在2017年提出要盖轻轨。那时候的想法很单纯，就是要让轻轨直接开进台铁的轨道，共用台铁的路权，预算80亿。这中间经过一番争论，其中有过轻轨取代台铁的讨论，也有过捷运取代台铁的想法。最终的结论是，想要取代台铁都行不通。因为八堵到南港这一段铁路，它不只是基隆人在用，它同时也是台北往返宜兰、花莲、台东的唯一铁路通道。如果要把这两条轨道改成基隆捷运，那原本的普悠玛号、太鲁阁号、自强号要走哪里？捷运是站站停的慢车，如果让花东的快车跟基隆的捷运骑在同一条轨道上，快车会慢车挡死，去宜兰、花东的人都会跳脚。另外，台铁不止载人，还载货，五堵那边有货柜场。花莲有水泥要运出来，甚至国军的坦克车演习调度，大多也是靠台铁在运作。一般的捷运系统是没有办法运送重型货物的。如果把台铁废了， 改成捷运，这些货物要全部挤上国道1号吗？不太可能。再来就是工程面的问题了。台铁的轨距是1067毫米的窄轨，而标准的捷运系统通常是1435毫米的标准轨。如果要改，等于要把整条铁路挖掉重铺，连电压系统、套制系统都要换，这跟重新盖一条捷运线是一样的意思了。所以在2020年召开北基轨道建设路网政策沟通平台会议，也就是俗称的4首长会议，有当时的交通部长林佳龙、台北市长柯文哲、新北市长侯友宜、基隆市长林右昌，最终达成基隆轻轨升级为重运量捷运的历史共识，预算从80亿提高到425亿。这个425亿是指南港到八堵基隆捷运第1阶段的预算。到了2024年1月，行政院正式核定基隆线第1阶段综合规划时，因原物料上涨、缺工、通膨，还有土地征收成本，总经费核定为696.89亿元，大约为697亿元。但最后经费是怎么从大约697亿元涨到1200多亿的呢？很感谢你看到这里，如果喜欢我的分享，希望能花个3秒钟按下订阅、房市入场券的按钮。我们会持续推出好内容，带你从历史脉络、地理限制与工程视角，看懂脚下的土地将如何改变。如果你已经订阅了，也欢迎分享给关心房市的朋友。新北市政府是基隆捷运的主管机关，新北市评估，如果只开697亿，根本没有好的厂商愿意来投标，甚至会流标到天荒地老，所以提出必须要把预算拉高到符合市场行情的1200多亿，第1阶段才有可能盖得成。关于提升预算这块，中间有复杂的程序。总之结论是，先用原本核定的697亿元进行发包，让工程动起来，等到发包出去了，再办理修正计划，把不足的钱补进来。这样的策略是不是真的发包成功了呢？答案是有厂商进场了，但主体轨道还没完全发包出去。我先说明一下基隆捷运第1阶段的路线，这段全长约15.6公里，总共设13个车站，从 SB22八堵站出发，八堵站规划平面车站，方便转乘台铁。出发后路线往西，就开始慢慢爬升为高架，沿着明德一路转进恭敬西路与实践路。这一块是7堵跟6堵基隆重要的工业聚落，阳明海运总部就是在7堵这里。接着跨越基隆河到国军北5堵营区，离开基隆后，接上新北市汐止大同路3段，也就是长荣货柜场附近，接着转进前安路与新台5路2段，到了汐止区公所，基隆捷运会和汐东捷运汇合，两条线在这里共轨一起跑，一直到 SB13站才会分开。分开之后呢，基隆捷运会利用台铁第3轨的用地空间，进入台北市交界南洋大桥附近。南港路段改用地下潜遁隧道的方式一路钻，最后抵达终点 SB31南港站。转乘站的话，就是八堵跟细科可以转台铁，南港则是转捷运板南线、台铁跟高铁。看完这段，你应该能明白为什么有人会说目前的基隆捷运根本还没有盖到核心，因为第1阶段位在基隆的有5站。其实除了八堵以外，其他都属于7堵区，八堵则是在7堵区跟南港区的交界，而基隆的真正核心是在基隆内港的区域，也就是仁爱区跟中正区。我认为要到第2阶段真的盖起来，才能算是名副。
The Loomis method is that method people use to draw heads, where you start off with a circle, draw the ellipses to show what direction it's facing, you slice off the side, and then you can add the features on it. People have a bunch of different variations of it, but the base is pretty much always the same. We start with a sphere, and this is also where everything goes wrong, and this might be why the Loomis method doesn't work for you. No matter what method you use to draw the details, if your sphere is drawn incorrectly, the head is going to be wrong. The sphere is made up of 5 lines, technically. We have the circle, 2 lines that divide the circle in quarters, and 2 ellipses. For this sphere to be correct, these lines need to be near perfect. They don't need to be absolutely perfect, but there's a very small margin for error. This is where people, especially beginners, usually go wrong. They don't draw the sphere correctly, and then it doesn't really matter what you do on top of that because your foundation is already incorrect. The first thing we need to do is draw a circle, which sounds pretty simple, but it needs to be very close to a perfect circle. A common mistake that people make when drawing their circles is that they either slant it to one side or they make one side longer than the other. If you use a circle like this as your base, the head that you're drawing will always end up looking too wide on one side compared to the other. There isn't really an easy way to draw better circles other than working on your line control skills, which I did make a video on recently. An exercise you can do though is tracing circles, which I recommend doing slowly and with control instead of drawing them quickly because you won't really get better at controlling your muscles like that. Another thing you can do is drawing a plus and then draw the circle by drawing each quarter separately, and this will make you better at thinking about the actual shape. You could also say, why not just use the line tools to make the circle? And the issue is that your line control is still going to be bad when it comes to the rest of the lines. So until you improve your line control, the sphere will still look incorrect even if you're using the line tools. Next, we need to draw the center lines of the sphere. These are just 2 lines that are perpendicular to each other that go through the center of the sphere. The most important one is the vertical one because this determines the angle of the head. If we want to keep the head perpendicular to the ground, we need to keep this line perfectly vertical, and if we want it to be slightly angled, we need to slightly angle this line. The horizontal line isn't as important, but it is useful for when we need to draw the brow ridge ellipse because this line is the major axis of that ellipse. The mistake you can make when drawing these lines is not having them go through the center of the circle. Later on, when we add the ellipses, they will be drawn according to both of these lines. So, if these are in the wrong spot, the ellipses will be in the wrong spot, and that will result in your final proportions being wrong. So, make sure that you mark the center of the circle first. Now, I also recommend deciding which direction the head will be facing because this will help you draw the ellipses. You can do this by placing a dot somewhere in the sphere and then connecting this dot back to the center of the sphere, and this will show you what direction it's facing. Before we continue, this video is sponsored by Skillshare. Now recently I've been practicing 3-dimensional forms, as you can probably see from this video. It's all about drawing proper 3-dimensional spheres. To help with this practice, I actually went through Brent Eviston's Drawing in 3 Dimensions class on Skillshare. This class is all about how to draw the simple geometric forms like boxes and spheres, and he also goes over how to make some more complex forms. Then at the end of the class, we put all of these forms together, and that will help us draw actual 3-dimensional objects. This is a fantastic class for learning the basics of how to draw in perspective, and you can apply this to anything, even the human body. Brent actually has a bunch of other classes on Skillshare as well that cover other parts of the drawing process. He has a bunch of stuff on figure drawing as well. So, if you're looking for some new study material, I'd highly recommend checking out his classes. Now, outside of Brent's classes, Skillshare has a bunch of other stuff as well, covering basically any topic you can think of, and all of these classes are taught by industry professionals. The art and illustration category in particular probably has one of the largest selections of classes on the whole platform. There are classes on watercolor, calligraphy, fashion design, pretty much any skill that you would need as an artist. So, if you want to improve as an artist in any of these categories, I'd highly recommend checking out Skillshare. The first 500 people to use my link in the description or scan the QR code will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Now for the ellipses, these are probably the hardest thing about drawing the sphere because it's a very difficult shape to draw and the way these ellipses are angled matters. I won't go into the perspective stuff, and I'll try to keep it very intuitive. I'll refer to the ellipse of the center line of the face as the vertical ellipse and the brow ridge ellipse as the horizontal ellipse. The horizontal ellipse isn't that difficult to draw. It needs to go through the dot we placed earlier, and then another thing is that this ellipse will get divided into 4 quadrants by the horizontal and vertical lines we drew earlier. You need to make sure that these quadrants have the exact same proportions, so if we flip some of these, they have the exact same shape. That's one of the characteristics of ellipses, and I guess if you want to know more about how ellipses work, you can join our Discord server, because I do have a homework exercise there about drawing ellipses, which might explain it a lot better. The vertical ellipse is a lot harder because we can't use the vertical and horizontal lines as a guide. The reason for that is that an ellipse needs a minor axis which goes perpendicularly through the surface of the ellipse. And if you think about it in 2 dimensions, this line touches the 2 least wide points of the ellipse. In the case of the horizontal ellipse, the vertical line that we drew in the sphere was its minor axis. And then an ellipse also needs a major axis, which is just a line that's always at a 90-degree angle to the minor axis. And this one touches the 2 widest points of the ellipse. So again, with the horizontal ellipse, we have the minor axis, which was the vertical line that we drew in the sphere, and then its major axis is the horizontal line, because as you can see, it's at 90 degrees to that minor axis. On the other hand, the minor axis of the vertical ellipse is a line going to a vanishing point, and the angle of this line depends on how the sphere is rotated. And to be able to figure that out, you need to think about it in terms of a box instead of a sphere. And that requires some really good perspective knowledge. What I recommend instead is just kind of guessing. There's basically 3 patterns. When the middle of the sphere lines up with its own horizon line, the vertical ellipse will be perfectly vertical. When the sphere is below its horizon line, the vertical ellipse will be angled backwards. And when the sphere is above its horizon line, the vertical ellipse will be angled forward. This is not an actual rule, by the way, or it's not a complete rule. It's still true, but there are some specifics that I didn't explain because that would take way more time. If you do want to learn more about it, you could pick up the Complete Guide to Perspective Drawing, because it does explain the whole minor and major axis thing when it comes to ellipses. So keep this kind of rule in mind, and then also make sure that this vertical ellipse is touching that point that we placed earlier. If you did this more or less right, the point where both ellipses intersect will line up with the direction the sphere is facing. This isn't an indication that everything is done correctly, but it's just one of the conditions that needs to be met. So if it doesn't line up, you didn't do it right. Now, let's do some actual attempts of drawing spheres now. The main issue that you're going to run into with drawing these forms is line control, probably. So the main thing you'll have to practice if you want to get better at drawing these shapes is your line control. Now, for the circle, I would recommend just redo the shape until you've got something that looks correct. You can rotate your paper the entire time and make small adjustments as you go, which might be really hard to do in traditional, but I mean, I guess technically you can use an eraser to do it. So once we have the circle, we need to add our vertical and horizontal lines, and then of course the angle of the vertical line determines the angle of the head. So if I have it pointing this way, we're going to have a head that's angled, the head will be angled that way. So I guess we'll start by just having it perfectly vertical. Now the main thing here is you need to make sure it goes through the center of the sphere so that it cuts this perfectly in 2 vertical halves. And then same thing with the horizontal one, also needs to go directly through the middle so that we have 4 equal quadrants. And then once you've got these drawn, actually, you can now rotate the paper again just to see if there are any more discrepancies in the shape, and you can fix the circle as you go along. I think this looks more or less fine. Then from here, we need to decide the direction the head is going to be facing. We'll just do a very simple facing this way, so we can connect both of these, and that shows that it's pointing that way. So then now we need to draw our horizontal ellipse. When it comes to drawing the horizontal ellipse, We know that the vertical line is the minor axis, which means that the horizontal line is the major axis, because this is at 90 degrees to it. And the widest points of this ellipse are going to be on the horizontal line, and in this case they'll be touching the edges of the sphere, and then the least wide points will be somewhere on the minor axis, and those won't be touching the least, or those won't be touching the edges of the sphere in most scenarios. The ellipse also has to go through this point, or it has to touch it, and there is a lot of guesswork involved when it comes to actually drawing this ellipse, so as a beginner, you might struggle with it quite a bit. So I guess we need to take this distance and replicate that on this side. I think that would be right around there probably. So then we just extend the ellipse this way. And then I think on this side it's a bit too sharp, so you can adjust. Then the vertical ellipse, like I said, that one is a lot harder to draw because we don't have a minor or major axis, unless you want to think about it in terms of a box. And in this case, if we have a front plane that's facing this way, it means that our box has to be angled kind of like this, meaning that there's a vanishing point over on this side. So the minor axis of our vertical ellipse will be angled like that, meaning that our major axis will be angled like, will be angled like that. And this means that our vertical ellipse will be angled kind of backwards. That whole box thing is just really hard to do, and it does take a lot of perspective skills, so that's why I say you should just learn how to estimate the vertical ellipse. It has to go through this point as well, and we know it has to be angled backwards. So let's see, it has to go through that point, slightly angled backwards, and then it has to have kind of equal proportions. And then just to check it, we can extend this line backwards, and it has to intersect where both of those ellipses intersect with each other. So with the ellipse I've drawn, the major axis looks like that, and then that means that the minor axis will look like this, going to a vanishing point there. Those still have to go through the center of the sphere, by the way. And let's try one more. First thing is always going to be the circle. And the circle doesn't ever have to be foreshortened, by the way. A circle will always look like a sphere will always look like a circle, even in perspective. And then you might also find that there are some parts of the circle that you can draw better than the others. Like in my case, I'm pretty good at drawing this side of the circle, but then this is the only side I really struggle with. Then once we have this, we can decide the angle. I think we're going to angle it like this time. So mark where the center of the sphere is. I think it's going to be right around there. So then draw our vertical line, and then the horizontal line needs to be at 90 degrees to it. And if need be, you could use a ruler to like figure out what the 90-degree angle is. I do recommend drawing all of these lines freehand because it just ends up making you better at drawing the lines eventually. But when it comes to figuring out the 90 degrees, you could use a ruler for that. And then let's say we're going to Freiryn angle this one. So we have the face pointing up like that. Now for the horizontal ellipse, again, that's pretty easy. You can just rotate this, and then we have the exact same scenario that we had on the first one, where it's just minor axis, major axis. So we rotate it like this. And then from here, make sure that it goes through that point. Keep it perfectly symmetrical across both the minor and major axis. Need to redo this side. That doesn't look perfect, especially right here, but you can just adjust it. And then for the vertical ellipse, because this thing is looking up, the vertical ellipse is going to be angled forwards a little bit. There we go. And then, of course, make sure the center of that ellipse is the center of the sphere, or lines up with the center of the sphere. And that's basically how you practice this. I would say you can draw a bunch of these, basically just as a warm-up. You could also try to find a 3D model somewhere online. I'm sure somebody has something for Blender that you can use, and then use that to like look around in 3D and actually correct your mistakes that way. And that's basically it for the video. So if you guys enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like. Let me know in the comments what else you want to see. Don't forget, you can join our Discord server with the link in the description. You can also join the YouTube memberships if you'd like to support the channel. And then I guess I will catch you all next time.
You're likely going to fail most of the art goals that you set for yourself this year. I'm not trying to be harsh, just realistic. 91% of people abandon their New Year's resolution by the end of January. So your goal of I'm going to draw every day, or I'm finally going to get good at anatomy, statistically dead by the end of this month. But why? Why is committing to a goal so hard? What makes us give up? Well, in this week's episode of YouTube Art School, I'll try to explain why that happens and what are the 3 psychological switches that you need to flip to start making real, actual progress this year. You'll see it's actually nothing big, just a few mind tricks that you gotta start doing, ones that will have a massive impact. So let's see what they are. So the first change is to stop hoping you'll succeed through willpower alone, because really willpower is like 1-ply toilet paper. Unreliable when you need it most. Because think about it, it's not your first new year. Like in the past, even when you were super motivated on January 1st, that feeling lasted what, like a week, 2 weeks? And then life happens. You know, you get busy, you get tired, you just kind of forget about it, and that initial excitement that you had just fades. And then suddenly, drawing feels more like a chore. Most goals require you to push yourself, you know, like to make room in your schedule, maybe say no to like fun things like playing video games, like watching or binging Netflix or some anime series, whatever. All of that takes willpower, and willpower kind of comes and goes. So what's the solution? You got to build a vision instead, because a simple goal like I want to become good at drawing, that's way too isolated. It has no context, really, and it's not compelling enough to pull you through all the really hard days where you're not going to want to do those things. But a vision, on the other hand, a vision is magnetic. Like, here's the difference. Like, a goal is, I want to draw more. A vision, on the other hand, might be something like, I'm going to create a webcomic that my younger self would have really enjoyed, or maybe like my younger siblings. And by the end of this year, I'll have maybe a full chapter done, so like the 25 pages done. You feel that difference? In the first case, requires willpower to constantly push yourself to do the things that you should be doing. But the other goal, the vision, instead pulls you along. It's the same feeling, really, that you have when you start a relationship, that initial excitement that pulls you, that compels you to do a lot of things that are way out of character, perhaps. Or if you're just working towards a promotion at work, you know, suddenly when you see the carrot dangling in front of you, it's a lot more compelling to work to try and get it. The pull is automatic. The push requires constant effort. So for any goal that you set this year, spend real time building a compelling vision around it. Make it vivid. Make it very specific. Write it down and then put it somewhere that you'll always see. And if you can't build a strong vision around your goal, honestly, just drop it. It's clearly not important enough to achieve anyway. And failing at it will just make you feel like crap. All right, here's the second trick. Raise your standards. Your standards are what define you as a person. They define what you're capable of, but they can also limit you hard. Let me explain with an example. Like, let's say you define yourself as a serious artist, someone who's hungry to improve. Then sitting down for an hour or 2 a day to practice should feel relatively normal. It's just what you do. It's non-negotiable, right? Like when you don't do it,